Well, first of all, there's nothing similar about me compared to the other people who are running. I'm the only person who's actually running in this congressional race that has actually worked on federal policy at a major government agency and have done so for 2 federal presidents. The other thing that makes me different is the majority of people running for this congressional seat are people who are from Albany, a place where you have corruption, incompetence, and mismanagement. And yet they have not done anything to actually make themselves stand out in Albany, other than do things that are negative and believe now that they should have the ability to go to Washington, D.C. To give you an example, Adriana Espaillat has missed more days and missed more votes in the state Senate than anybody else has in over the last decade. Keith Wright, the only thing that can be his claim to fame is 2 things he's done over the last few years. One, filed a lawsuit on behalf of Donald Trump against Governor Pataki, who was governor, to try to make certain that Trump had no competition with Indian casinos in upstate New York when Trump owned casinos in New Jersey. And the other thing that Keith Wright has done, he's taken majority of his money from real estate developers when he's chairman of the Housing Committee, and rents have increased more than 90% in Central Harlem, more than 75% throughout New York City, and more than 60% in the Bronx. And if you look at Adriana Espaillat, who also sits on the Housing Committee in the Senate, if they believe that these figures make them viable and make them people who've done something to really move this community in a positive direction, something's wrong. That's not what good government should be about. Government policy is supposed to improve people's lives, not make things more difficult for them. And when you look at our schools, Governor Cuomo put a report in 2015 showing failing schools all across the state of New York. Several of those failing schools are right here in this congressional district and have been failing schools again for decades. You look at the healthcare disparities in our communities, particularly among seniors, African Americans, and Latinos, they're great. People deserve better than that, and that's why I'm running. I mean, there's several things I've done, and let me be clear, I've never been elected to anything, so I'm doing things as a private citizen, but I'll be more than happy to tell you what I have done. I'm a person who got an organization in East Harlem called Strive, a community-based organization that deals with some of the most at-risk people in our community, like ex-offenders and people on public assistance. I got them invited to a roundtable discussion at the White House with President Obama. I helped them identify funding from the federal government at the Labor Department to do additional programming. I created the Harlem Small Business Initiative program under President Clinton, which small business owners in this community would tell you kept them from going out of business. I did the expansion and did the awareness for the Earned Income Tax Credit program, which is a great program for people to get tax returns, particularly poor people who have low-income people in our community, to get more money put back in their pocket every year. I worked out a program where Princeton Review either gave free or reduced testing for the SAT and ACT exams for poor black and brown kids in this community, but also all across the country. I worked with Cy Vance to figure out how it is we need to do something to bring about more public safety in our community and also keep kids from getting caught up in the criminal justice system. I've done those things not being elected to anything, so imagine what I would do if I was elected to office. As Deputy Chief of Staff at the U.S. Department of Agriculture under Bill Clinton, when I worked for him at the end of the Clinton administration, I worked at an agency that had an $18 billion budget and more than 100,000 employees. I worked in the food stamp program, the WIC program, the National School Lunch Program, which feeds more kids than any other program every single day. And so those are the things I've done as a private citizen, and I think I could do much more if I were elected to public office. Well, the majority of the rent regulations and rules that govern rents here in New York City comes from Albany. And there's several things I think people can do and the things I would do. One, this being a congressional member give you ability to have a bully pulpit to push issues and make clear to people what do you think is important. Even though you don't have direct input in the laws of Albany. The other thing that it gives you the ability to do is go after monies from Washington, D.C. to bring about more affordable housing in this community. There's money at the Treasury Department, the Capital Magnet Fund. Again, $90 million sitting there that nobody's gone after that money to bring back to this community. There's money at HUD under the Housing Trust Fund, again, hundreds of millions of dollars that again can be brought back in this community to build affordable housing. I think we should stop allowing people to warehouse apartments all across our congressional district. And when you stop to think about people who live in public housing, and there are more than there are 550,000 people who live in public housing throughout New York City. If I'm not mistaken, the majority of public housing is in New York City is in East Harlem. I think we need to do something to also stabilize that environment. One of the things I think we should do is Manhattanville project that Columbia's building. They gave millions of dollars to the community in an agreement to build that project. There's money still sitting at the Upper Manhattan Empowerment Zone. I think we should use that money and figure out how it is we do life-threatening emergency repairs right now in public housing. You have seniors that live in buildings where you have mold, where they're held prisoners in their apartments because the elevators don't work, or where you don't have lighting in the common areas. Those are the kind of things I think we should fix right now. And then I think the New York City delegation, including both senators and others, need to have a realistic conversation and come up with a real long, forward-thinking plan about what it is we need to do to really bring about real change in public housing. And that's a long-term plan that we all need to be a part of. First of all, I don't have just one issue. There are many issues. The issue that comes up more than anything else is affordable housing, which we talked about. Education comes up a lot, which we talked about. The other thing that comes up a lot is health care. And the other thing that I think people understand is that people know for a fact they're being pushed out of their community. People who've been living here for 40, 30, and 20 years can no longer afford to live here. They know for a fact their children, their grandchildren will not have the ability to live in a community they care about. There are more Dominicans now that live in the Bronx than they live in Washington Heights. You see the same gentrification issues taking place up here. And so no one has done anything to change that tide. And people want somebody who's really going to watch out for their best interests, and that's what I plan on doing. Not just on one issue, but on every issue that's important to people. I was working as the National Political Director of the Democratic National Committee. I went out and pushed the Affordable Health Care Act on behalf of President Obama all across the country. Millions of people today have health insurance that didn't have it just a few years ago. Is it a perfect piece of legislation? No. But I think we can go back and make additional changes to it to make it better. I believe that we as a community have an obligation to take care of those who are sick. I look at Medicaid and Medicare and what is done to actually improve health, particularly for poor people and for seniors. We need to continue to do those kind of things to bring about change in our community. I would have no problem supporting a single-payer healthcare system. I think it's a great idea in theory, but there's no way in the world that would have got passed through this Congress. It's almost amazing, actually, that this president got what he got passed. And I commend him for having the political acumen to know what he could and could not do and getting something passed that actually helps millions of people today, right now. Look, I think I would be a hypocrite to tell anybody they should not have the right to choose to send their kids somewhere, particularly when we have so many failing schools in our congressional district. I opted out of the schools and I send my kids to private school. And so for me to tell other people they should not have an option because they don't have resources, I think would be hypocritical. I believe that the conversation we should be having is not charter school versus traditional public school, but figure out what works well in both and figure out how we bring those things to scale. I think co-location is a problem. I think too often when schools are co-located, you see schools that have a lot more resources than schools that don't. And kids can see those inequalities in education, which I don't think is a healthy thing. I'd be willing to debate anyone beyond the primary. I think debates are extremely important. I wish we had more debates during the primary. I think it's important that people have a clear sense of who wants to represent them and where they stand on issues. Very easy. You can go to my website, ClydeWilliams2016.com. We are 21 days out. We need to get as many people engaged and involved in our campaign as possible. If you're interested in donating, please, as I said, go to our website. If you're interested in contributing, again, you can go to our website. And if you want to just find out more information and make a real informed decision about who wants to represent you, go to our website. Again, ClydeWilliams2016.com.